for the crown star block, you're going to need 4 squares for the outer 4 corners, and that will be your background color. In the quilt Seasons of Friendship, you're using a dark for your background, but for this demonstration, we're going to be using a light background. For the center squares, we do need 2 pieces of fabric that are equal in size for half square triangles. And then for our outer half square triangles, we are going to be sewing 8 at a time. So we have our 2 pieces cut to the correct size. And what we're going to do is on the wrong side of one of the fabrics, you're going to draw a line from corner to corner, and you'll repeat that for the other corner to corner. You're also going to draw a line halfway in the center, horizontally and vertically. So because this is pencil, it's not going to be seen later, and it is on the wrong side of the fabric. So what we're going to do now is sew on both sides of the diagonal lines, and then we will use the other lines for cutting. When you get to the end, you're going to pivot with your needle in the down position. And this is going to be a scant 1/4 inch because it's easier to trim it later when you're done than not end up with the right size. So now we have our seams sewn. As you can see, a 1/4 inch side on each side of the drawn line, and those are the diagonal lines. And now we can cut it apart. For the center half square triangles, we're going to place right sides together our 2 fabrics, and we are going to stitch all the way around the edge of the square. One 1/4 inch seam. Again, when you hit the corner, just leave your needle in the down position. And then you can snip your thread, and we are ready to cut this block. So for this block, what we're going to do is cut our vertical and horizontal lines first. So we're just going to line it up directly on top of that drawn line. And we're going to make our cuts. Now we can cut from corner to corner. If it shifts at all at this point, just make sure you make adjustments before you cut all the way through. So there's 2 half square triangles, 4, 6, and 8. So we have our 8 half square triangles cut. Now we need to press them open. If you have a light and a dark, then just press this open to the dark fabric, or the darker of the 2 fabrics. You're going to repeat this process for each block that you're going to be sewing together. Now that we have them all pressed, now we need to square them up. For squaring up my half square triangles, I like to use the ruler block lock. And you are going to refer to the pattern to see what size this half square triangles needs to be squared up to. but you just use the channel in the ruler to guide or to secure where the ruler is placed before trimming, so it allows it doesn't shift or move, and your half square triangles end up to be really nice. It does take some time when you're doing a lot of blocks, but you really do need to square up your half square triangles before sewing them together into either blocks or the quilt top. All right, now I have all of my half square triangles squared up and ready to go into the block. For the 4 center half square triangles, we sewed around the outside edge of these 2 squares. Now we're going to cut them from corner to corner. And this will give us our 4 half square triangles. After I have cut those apart, we're going to press them open. Just make sure you press them to the dark side again, or at least to the same side so they nest together when you sew them. All right, now we can square these up. Again, I'm going to use the block lock ruler. Now that we have all of our pieces of our block readies, we can lay this out and sew it together. So the first thing I'm going to do is just get my center squares laid out how I want them. Then I will be adding my outer squares as well as the half square triangles. So just want to make sure that when you're placing these down that they are facing the right direction as far as where the point is. And then make any adjustments before you sew it together. So I've used a board. It's called the Steady Betty and I really like it. But anything will work. So I just lay it out on this and now I can take it to my sewing machine and sew it together. All right, I have my block all laid out, and what I'm going to do is start sewing these 2 together and then move down into these other sections without having to snip my thread. So now that I have those first 2 sewn, I can grab my next 2, just making sure that I am stitching the correct edge, keeping my seam right. And my last row. Now to keep this organized just a little bit, I'm only going to snip off the very first one that I sewed. I'm going to open it up, make sure that it's in the right position, and then I'm going to add my next piece. I'm going to repeat it for the next section. So I'm going to open it up, make sure that's in the right, going the right direction, and I'm going to place this next part in correct order. And I'm just going to continue to repeat that process. And the last one. So now I've got 3 blocks sewn together, and I'm going to sew my third or my outer corner on. This really helps me keep the block straight and organized without losing parts and pieces. You just need to make sure that everything is lined up and going the right direction before sewing it down. All right, and our last piece is the corner. All right, so what I did now is I went back to the first two and I snipped those off, and I can lay them out and then fold the first row over and sew them together. So I just need to make sure that I line up my seams really well, and I can determine where it lays so they can kind of nest together. If you need to pin or use your pins, go right ahead to keep them secure from shifting. When you're making any adjustments while you sew, leave the needle in the down position before doing anything. So I can stop, make a few adjustments, and then I can continue on. All right, so I'm going to repeat that for the bottom two rows. So I'm going to snip them off. I'm going to open them up. I'm going to double check to make sure everything is laid out properly, right sides together, and then I'm going to sew this row together. So now that I have my the top half and the bottom half of this quilt block sewn together, I can lay it out one more time. Make sure that all my pieces and parts are going in the correct direction. Then I'm going to right sides together and sew this, making sure that those seams line up. Going to check where the seam directions are going. Makes it easier when I sew it, but also when I press it. All right, now that I have my block all finished, I can go ahead and give this a good press.